Alright, so we have our board all polished with nowhere to go. We're going to set change to that by installing the hardware complete and then installing the electronics, making sure that it's all sealed, ready to hit the water. The first thing we're going to install is our rudder and our rudder control arm. What I like to do with the rudder control arm sleeve, this nylon plastic sleeve, is just inject red rubber grease up into the tube. Just push it through slowly. And you can see the grease coming through here. It's just good to fill the tube with grease. This creates a water seal, a watertight seal. And once this grease is in here, it's really not going to go anywhere. You can sort of go halfway. And take our control rod, and then when we push this through the tube, it'll actually push the grease back up, further up. Just put your finger on the end. Keep as much of the grease in the tube as possible. And there we have a nice watertight control arm sleeve. Just slide that into place. We've got our bifin. You can see on the bifin here we have a little flat that the grub screw on the control lever is going to fasten onto, so not allowing it to slip or allowing it to drop out. We don't put any grease on the stainless steel drive shaft because that would just attract sand, and we don't put any grease in the tube either. There's enough water, you want the water to flush through, wash any of the sand out and keep it as sand free as possible. So that goes through. We have a little O-ring on the shaft here, just to stop the rattle. You just snap that up, nice and tight. And we have our rudder in place. Right, the next thing we're going to install is our actual drive shaft, our stainless steel drive shaft. I choose the stainless steel solid drive shaft for numerous reasons. One of them especially being in salt water, the stainless steel is not going to rust. You'll find a lot of your flexible shafts are not made of a material that's rust free or rust proof. Yeah, you don't have to worry too much about preserving this drive shaft, just really sealing it and partial lubrication. We have our little bush at the rear for the drive shaft, where most of our friction is, or only part of our friction is. The rest of this part over here is free from any friction within the tube, and then remember we've got a small 25mm bush at the front there. So yeah, it's really got a minimal surface area for friction, but what we want to do is capture some grease in the tube to create a nice water seal throughout. We're going to start off by using the red rubber grease once again. I'll just place my syringe in the drive shaft housing and inject a couple of mil of grease. Pull that out. On my drive shaft, just put a little squeeze of grease along here. Not too much. Smear it on the drive shaft. Move it down where the bearing is. Okay, our drive shaft's also got a small flat that's going to connect to the coupling. Just place our drive shaft in. Just pump it in and out, just so that the grease distributes itself nicely. I'm holding my finger at the end of the stuffing tube, just to try and keep the grease in. Okay, so we have our prop in situ drive shaft greased up in place. You can see the drive shaft extending out of the stuffing tube there. Just going to retract that. And now we're going to drop our motor in. And you'll recall how I said how easy it is to install the motor and drive shaft alignment. It's really a case of just dropping the motor down, pushing your drive shaft forward, and nipping up your Allen studs and your grub screws. Okay, so you can see the drive shaft there the square. You see that flat square? It just slides in to the coupling. And we lift that up, the grub screw on the one side onto the flat, just a little pinch, rotate it round, and lift up on the grub screw on the opposite side just to balance the torque. If we statically rotate everything, we can see everything's nicely aligned, nice and smooth. So there we have our drive shaft installed, motor installed. We have our rudder control arm installed, nicely greased tube. Now it's time to sort out the electrics. Right, so for our electrics that's going into the board, we've got our ESC here. I've got a 120 amp ESC. Got a little servo, I've got an all metal gear, park size servo. I think it's a 3 kilogram torque, 3 to 5, and then I've got a little receiver here. And unfortunately, when it comes to electrics and water, the two don't live happily ever after. So we have to ensure that each one of these items are sealed within the housing. Even though our housing is sealed, there's always a chance of some moisture getting inside there, be it through a leakage through a stuffing tube, leakage through a seal, a water pipe leak, water seal around the water jackets leaking. There's always an opportunity for water to get in some way. So we want to take absolute precaution in sealing these electronic devices. ESCs are often rated as waterproof. That certainly is never the case. Whatever they use to coat these ESCs with just doesn't work, so they need to be sealed properly. And I'm going to spend some time in this process showing you how to seal each one of these as we install them into the board. So the first one we're going to start with is our little servo. Right, so the first item I'm going to demonstrate to you on sealing is our little servo. You can purchase waterproof servos, but for all intensive purposes and perhaps savings on cost, we're just going to look at this little servo and see how best we can seal it. There are three vulnerable areas. You've got your opening around your servo horn over here where moisture can get in. You've got a seal along this edge over here where your servo gearbox housing splits, and then we have a seal around the base over here that is also vulnerable to moisture getting inside. So what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to close up the joints on the servo housing itself, and then we're going to seal the horn. With the help of some just common electrical insulation tape, we're going to seal those joints up. Take the tape, first going to wrap it around the electrical exit and the base of the servo. Just fold it in nicely, fold it over like you're wrapping a little Christmas present, which we'll all be doing pretty soon. So once we have the base covered, and then take our tape, making sure we cover the seal at the top here. Wrap our tape around the servo. Just end it on the bottom. And there we got our joints closed up, the whole base is sealed, the wiring exit is sealed. Now we have our servo horn, which is a vulnerable area around here. So what I do is, once again with our red rubber grease, put a smidgen of grease around there, and then a tiny little O-ring, fit that over the horn. Make sure we get our grease all around it. I fit my servo horn. I want to make sure that it's zeroed. When I fit it onto the servo, I've got a nice little device over here. It's a little servo control device. So for me to set my servo up at zero, I just plug it into this device over here. You can see I can manually check my unit. I can select automatic function control, manual control, and I can set it for 0. So now when I place my servo horn on, I can can get it as close to zero where it would naturally be. I like to have it on the forward side when I install it. Okay, so there we have our servo taped up, grease O-ring, functioning nicely, ready to be installed. So with our servo all nicely taped up and extra sealed, I'm going to drop it into our servo tray. It's nice and snug between the two posts. I'm going to drop in our retaining plate. Secured with our two nil nuts. Just pinch it in place. We've got some fitting to do here. So there we have the servo position in place, and now we're just going to set up the control arm to the servo horn. So as I said before, what I found with RC surfing is all these little bits and pieces, they corrode, they weaken, they break off the horn. So over time now I've just realized that the best connection to have is a Z bend on the rudder control end, as well as a Z bend on the servo control end. On this end we have to do it by hand to get it accurate. Just line it up, bend it. See the Z I've bent in there? I'm just going to put that through the servo arm now. Right, so there we have our servo in place. Check it at zero. Okay, I'm just going to quickly solder on the plugs on this ESC. There are a lot of great tutorials on this on YouTube. I'm not going to go into depth here. I'm just going to go through the motions. Right, so we got our motor female plugs soldered onto the ESC. We can settle down into sealing it. And most all the ESCs, this is a 120 amp ESC, most all the ESCs come with a shrink wrap around it, but unfortunately we have a vulnerable area on this side where water is able to access the electronics and on the capacitor power input lead side. So what we're going to want to do is to seal both these ends so that no water can get in. What I use is a product that we call Tic Tac. We seem to struggle to identify it in other countries. I think in the States they call it Blue Tack. This is really just that stretchy, kind of sticky product that they use to put posters on walls, etc., etc. I'm sure you'll all be able to identify with it. And what we're going to do now is take this and work it inside this opening of the ESC here, push it down, get it in between the water outlet pipes and the wires, stuff it down there, almost like corking the inlet in a way. Right, and there we have a very simple way of sealing the ESC on both ends, ensuring that if and when water does get into your housing, your ESC is going to stay dry on the inside and live to fight another day. That is nice and neat over there. Now it's time for us to connect up our little receiver and ensure that this is sealed as well. Plug in our servo lead, motor lead. Before we seal that, we'll check that everything's functioning properly. Let's connect our battery. Connected to the servo and the motor, we'll just connect our battery. Check that all is functioning properly. Good. Now we can seal up our receiver. Once again, using our tic tac, press stick, blue tack, whatever you call it, you can wrap the receiver up nice and snugly. Move the putty around so that you have good coverage everywhere. You can see a complete seal, big ball for good measure. We'll drop this into a balloon, appropriate red balloon, 99 red balloons. And there we have our receiver, well and truly sealed. Fit into its little position. You can also see on my batteries, I'll seal the end of the battery off. Insulation tape, I'll put press stick between the wires, wrap the ends up in insulation tape on both ends of the battery. And this also helps your battery prevent any salt water going inside and corroding the aluminium contacts. Right, so there we have our servo mounted, fitted, sealed. We have our ESC positioned, wired up to the motor, sealed. We have our receiver connected to both the servo and the ESC, sealed. All that's left for me to do now is connect up our water pipes. Here we have our water cooling pipes set up. We have our inlet round through the ESC, from the ESC down through the motor, from the motor down to the outlet. We have our little sponges in our sponge well. We've checked for the correct rotational direction. Remember, if it's going in the wrong direction, you simply just switch out one of your three-phase leads to the motor. Servo is nice and secured. Receiver is nice and wrapped and packed, sealed, ready to connect the battery. Alright. Let's go get this puppy wet.